While we're all patiently waiting the 2 weeks until version 12 comes out, I figured I'd keep things interesting by doing what absolutely none of you asked for, by bringing the full self-driving beta onto the Las Vegas F1 track just hours before the race started. Now, I couldn't quite drive the entire track because they did start to close sections of the road at that time to get ready for the actual race, but that made for some pretty challenging situations for the beta where it had to reroute through temporary streets and abandon its navigation route several times to get through successfully, which it did. Some of the time, at least. This was a drive that really pushed the software to the absolute limits, and I definitely hit the edge of those limits more than usual, as you will see. And another thing about all the madness here is that it was really hard to make the car drive where I wanted it to. Usually, you know, I do my best to give you guys the best visual experience possible, but with all the rerouting the car was trying to do to avoid traffic down the strip, it was actually extremely difficult. And I had to get help from my wife, who was in the passenger seat, and there's a few times where we were frantically trying to correct navigation routes, as you will see. So I'm going to do my best to make it look as good as I can, but fair warning, you're going to see a little behind the scenes of how the sausage is made.
Yeah, I was routing us to go straight there.
We're going to get right into the full uncut drive right after I tell you about this video's sponsor. Why in the world am I being spammed with ads for dog treats? Even in the mail? You've got to be kidding. Honey, get over here. Did you forget to turn on the VPN again? Because apparently everyone and their mother now knows not only what treats you like, but also where we live. Don't be like Honey. Protect your online privacy with private internet access, a virtual private network that works by creating an encrypted connection to the web, making your online activities more private and secure so that your personal data doesn't end up in the wrong hands. You can also spoof your geolocation to one of 84 countries and all 50 individual US states, which not only unlocks region-locked content on things like streaming services, but can also help get you a better deal on things like flights and games. A single PIA membership can also protect everyone you care about, because unlike the competitors, you can use a single membership on an unlimited amount of devices simultaneously. And they're also open source, meaning if you have any questions at all about the way they operate, you can take a look under the hood and view the actual source code for yourself. That's definitely some confidence in their product. By using my special link in the description, you can get 83% off and 4 months free, which comes out to about $2 a month. They have support staff available 24/7 and a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can give it a try completely risk-free. And thanks again to PIA for being a sponsor of shenanigans like this. We're starting this drive in a parking lot close to the Las Vegas Strip, and we'll be attempting to cover as much of the actual racetrack as we can, which does become a bit challenging. Little trouble getting autopilot engaged, as you saw there, but after straightening it out a bit, second time was the charm. I apologize for that live camera view on the left. I had forgotten to turn it off before we started because we were in a bit of a time crunch to get going before all the streets closed, but I do notice and turn it off a bit later into the drive. Doing a fairly good job of going nice and slow through this parking lot, felt very comfortable, and you can also see it visualize that temporary barrier that was put in place there. Not sure what the purpose of the barrier is, besides making traffic a little worse. As you can see, a person from our left wants to come into this parking lot, although they're not using a turn signal of any kind. But once they come to a full stop, the beta does go ahead and proceed into the intersection. Gonna go ahead and fast forward through this next section while we're getting closer to the actual track, but before we get there is something I want to point out that's been bugging me about this version of the full self-driving beta for a while. As you can see on the bottom, our left-hand turn is coming up in the next 400 feet, and yet we're still in the right-hand lane. It does end up correcting itself a couple hundred feet from the stoplight just in time to make the turn without annoying too many people, but that's been a pretty common problem. It's not on all intersections, but there is some specific intersections where it doesn't seem to want to be in the right lane until the very last moment, even though it's displaying the GPS and everything properly, and it knows how long until the next turn's coming up. You can see the Las Vegas sphere on the left over there, which was incredible to see in person, but back to that late left turn, I'm really hoping that when AI completely takes over the path planner in the next version, we'll see improvements in areas like those. Speaking of AI, you can actually see it start to visualize the road to our left, which is not really visible because of those temporary barriers set up. You can see as we go through the next intersection, the road is actually there and looks a lot like the way it was displaying it, which was really amazing because remember, they aren't using HD maps. Autopilot starts slowing down here for the yield sign, and this was one of those situations where the camera on the fender that you see displayed there actually had a much better view of that yield than I did in the driver's seat. You can see it doesn't seem to have any idea how to interpret these track barriers. It's probably the first time it's ever seen them, and it starts visualizing them on and off as giant vehicles, which didn't cause a problem in this particular area, but did cause some problems a little later in the drive. We have a left turn coming up very soon, and at first it gets us correctly into the left lane, but then as you can see it changes to the right, probably because of those cones there, and then at the very last moment it does a pretty harsh brake to get us mostly into the left-hand lane. You can even see it displayed on the visualization. Our back end was hanging out just a little bit over that solid white line there. I also updated the navigation route here, which was a bad idea because it really wanted to reroute us around all the traffic. You can see the turn signals going crazy there. And I did notice that it was sending us the wrong way, and I tried to update the navigation path before the light turned green, but unfortunately, it was not soon enough.
Yeah, it was routing us to go straight there.
Which did cause the first disengagement of the drive. After re-engaging autopilot, you can see it's again trying to get off the strip to go back to the freeway to just go around all this chaos. But because the track's barriers are already set up, that right turn no longer exists. You can see the right turn signal come on, and it starts hunting for a way through this barrier here, which is not going to happen. Then, interestingly enough, it actually turns off the right turn signal, and the path planner starts going straight instead. Now, I did manually change the navigation path so that it followed the racetrack again, but I'm pretty sure it would have figured that out all by itself, and there is another example of that exact situation a little further ahead. And I'd again like to bring your attention to how it's visualizing the roads that it cannot see. You see in this intersection, the road off to our right, it's usually there, but right now it's completely blocked off. I'm really interested in your thoughts on how this is possible. Is it just remembering from old clips that it's seen here? Also doing a really nice job with these motorcycles not overreacting and keeping momentum. Older versions of the beta would have definitely slammed on the brakes in a situation like that. Gonna go ahead and fast forward while we're through this dense traffic here. You can see the beta is actually shifting left in its lane. You can see it again visualizing a bus over to the right hand side, and it's trying to stay as far away as it possibly can from that bus, getting really close to other cars in the process. This was a pretty consistent problem as we were sitting in this right lane here, and I'm starting to realize why it was so insistent that we drive around all this traffic, because this is absolutely terrible. Also, you may be able to see the car shifting to the left again because of this quote-unquote semi-truck behind us, which did cause the second disengagement of the drive.
Get away from this truck. Oh.
And after a little sigh of disappointment, we go ahead and re-engage. I do try to give the beta as long of a leash as I possibly can just to see if it would correct itself, but there are times like that one where it just goes a little bit too far for me. But as you can see, I did let it try to do this by itself. You can see it getting fairly close to other vehicles here, and I had to imagine that the drivers around me were probably pretty confused, or maybe just thought we were a terrible driver. But I do what I do for science, and hopefully the next time we come back here next year, the car is doing a lot better with these barriers. And I guess while we're sitting in traffic here together waiting for it to clear up, it'd be a good time to tell you why my wife and I were here in the first place. I mean, of course it was to see the race, but what you might not know is that I'm actually not much of an F1 fan myself. It's actually my wife who is. She will sometimes get up at 4 or 5 in the morning to watch these races and follows all the drama between the drivers and which contract is being signed with who. And with this race being closer to us than ever before, I really felt like we had to seize this opportunity. It was a little over 1,100 miles round trip to get here from where we live in California, but autopilot drove, I'd say, more than 99% of the time, honestly. And anyways, this Model Y was due for its first road trip. We actually even slept in the back overnight in the car because we figured it was kind of pointless to get a hotel when the race ended so late, or early in the morning, I guess, which was actually a much better experience than one might think, and I am planning on making a video about that in the future. So get subscribed if you want to see that. I also don't know if you noticed, but that Dodge Charger took off on us on the lights there, and it took everything inside of me not to just leave him in the dust. But I had to let autopilot be autopilot. There are Teslas absolutely all around us, as you can see. They were all over the Vegas Strip today. And as you can see on the navigation route, we have a kind of a U-turn to make in the next 0.3 miles. And autopilot gets into the left-hand lane a little bit early. You can see that person feeling a bit racy and did not want to let us in. But this is actually a little bit too soon. This left-hand turn lane is for the intersection before the one we want to get to. You can see me kind of taking a peek at the navigation route here and confirming that. This is one of those situations where I typically wouldn't intervene and I'd kind of let the car do its own thing and see if it can get to the navigation point on its own. But since I wanted to drive as much of the track as I possibly could, I do go ahead and disengage up here and kind of do the same thing the car in front of me is doing.
I'm actually going to do what he did.
Which does bring us to the third disengagement of the drive. So what we're doing here may not exactly be legal, and you can see we're actually pulling into another left-hand turn lane, but today is not the day where people were obeying all the laws and the arrows painted on the ground and stuff. It was pretty chaotic around here, so situation like this, not a huge deal. I don't know if you've noticed how insane the traffic has been, but we've probably only made it about a mile down the main straight this entire time. Probably took us a half hour. We have a left turn coming up to continue following the racetrack, but unfortunately we just missed it and they're just starting to cone it off. We also have a stoplight that's turned off in front of us. You can see traffic just going through it. Interestingly, autopilot also goes through it and doesn't stop at the light, even though it highlights them in blue. Very impressive, because that's kind of a hard situation to figure out. You can see the track continuing off to the left there, but we are forced to go straight, and autopilot actually handles it really well. There was a little beep, and it asked me to put my hands on the wheel just in case, but it did handle that entire maneuver all on its own and then rerouted again, as you can see on the bottom here. Now, the car continuing through that non-working stoplight there was actually really amazing. Knowing when to continue through an intersection with a non-functioning stoplight without stopping is actually an extremely hard problem. It's one of those things us human drivers kind of take for granted, but I'd imagine this is challenging for a robot. Another situation up here where you can see we have a left turn in 0.1 miles and it waits till the very last moment to get over a few lanes of traffic to get into that left-hand turn lane. Again, no idea why it waited so long. There was plenty of opportunities before this, and it kind of has to make a simultaneous double lane change here to get all the way over into the left-hand lane, which it does, but I just don't understand why it waited so long to do so in the first place. And although more and more of the racetrack was being shut off to traffic, and they obviously didn't want people driving through there, I thought it would be worth it to give it one more shot to try to get back into the racetrack, and you're going to see how that goes very shortly. And if you've made it this far into the video, congratulations, because according to my YouTube metrics, that means that your attention span is significantly longer than most. And also, please consider subscribing and liking the video if you haven't done so already. A lot of work goes into making and editing these videos, and it really does help me out a lot. Thank you. So our navigation route has us going straight through this intersection, but that's directly into the side of the track, and obviously the road is closed here, but the beta seems very confused, so another disengagement here. Road closed signs and construction in general seems to be the Achilles heel of current versions of the full self-driving beta. When Elon live streamed the version 12 demo, it was handling all those construction zones so smoothly, and I can't wait to test it against actual closed roads to see how it reacts. Speaking of which, we have another impossible destination in the navigation route, and having it turn left up here to try to get back onto the racetrack, but obviously no way to go in there. There's barriers set up. It does get into this suicide lane. I mean, the ground markings are all gone, but got here successfully, and then I did need to disengage to get it back onto the road because I have a feeling it would have just sat there forever. Now, what we're going to take a look at next at this upcoming intersection may seem pretty mundane for you and me, but does show just how far the beta has come in overall smoothness. So the first thing that happens is we have to do a little face-off with a bus here, which I can guarantee you earlier versions of the beta would have not handled so smoothly. You can also see the ground markings on the ground are not the way they usually are, but the beta handled this so smoothly. The software is kind of at a weird point right now, where sometimes it handles things that I don't expect it to handle so smoothly and effortlessly, and other things that seem pretty obvious for you and me, it struggles with quite a bit. What I'm hoping to see out of version 12 the most is actually consistency. Right now, it almost feels like there's multiple different people, or robots I should say, driving the car. Some of them are aggressive, some of them are smooth, and it seems to just have a split personality disorder sometimes, and you're going to see a really good example of that a little further ahead. Slowing this part down to show you some odd decision making, you can see we're going over a temporary bridge here, and out of all places, this is where the beta decides it wants to change lanes, right over a solid white line. To its credit though, the white line was pretty faded already at this point. You can actually see on the visualizations it's having a little bit of trouble trying to figure out whether it's a dotted white line or solid or what the heck it is. Also thought this was pretty cool. You can actually see the visualizations for the park assist showing each individual cone as we go by. I don't know why I find this so cool and mesmerizing, but I do. There also is supposed to be some major improvements to the accuracy of those visualizations coming up fairly soon, according to leaked release notes, but I guess we'll see. As you can see, traffic's starting to build ahead of us. I probably would have just cut to this gap to the left to free up traffic behind me because this person's turning right. But thank goodness I wasn't driving because some pedestrians pop out from the car in front of us. I do give the beta a pretty hard time sometimes for being a little too passive than I would be in a given situation, but that one was definitely one where it did a much better job than I would have through there. I probably would have made a little bit of an awkward situation for those pedestrians, and being passive was absolutely the safest thing that it could do there. But like I mentioned a minute ago, it's definitely not passive all the time and has a bit of a split personality, as you're going to see here. So a truck is cutting across the lane to the left, and you can see the beta nudging itself forward. Even though it's highlighting it in blue, it's going forward right now, kind of like it's upset that this guy was going in front of us. I mean, I know it's impossible for the beta to actually get upset, but that's what the intention behind the wheel felt like. Another example of that here. Traffic to our right is merging in here because their lane ends, and the beta does not seem to want to let this gentleman through, which was very awkward. He gives us the coldest stare you can possibly imagine. The beta does leave a little bit of a gap in front of us, so I guess he could have merged in if he wanted to, but the beta goes around him and he actually just merges in behind us. Definitely a pretty rude maneuver, if I do say so myself, and made for a pretty awkward situation for my wife who was sitting in the passenger seat.
How rude.
I just made eye contact.
I know. I'm sorry.
That's my wife saying that she was just trying to avoid eye contact at all costs. Uh-oh. That uh-oh was because the interior camera had finally ran out of battery, and as you can see, the third-person camera also shifted a bit to the left, so I think this is probably a good place to call it. Believe it or not, this video was well over an hour of driving, even though it didn't seem like we drove very far at all. Probably not even a full lap around the circuit. And while yes, there were a lot more disengagements than usual, I actually think it performed fairly well given the types of situations it was up against here. I think most of the disengagements we had today were caused by robotic behavior in the path planner, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for when the path planner finally gets replaced by the AI that's been exclusively trained off of good driving behavior from humans. I have a feeling we're going to see a major step change in the performance of full self-driving. At least, I hope so. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I truly do appreciate it. And until next time, everyone. Bye.